Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
There is a moment nobody talks about. Not the breakup. Not the silence. Not even the waiting. It's the moment she stops emotionally reaching for him and suddenly he can feel her everywhere. Not because she became louder. Actually, the opposite. She stopped checking if he noticed. Stopped rewriting texts in her head. Stopped trying to sound soft enough to keep him comfortable. Stopped explaining the same wound in 10 different ways, hoping one version would finally land. And something about that silence unsettled him more than any argument ever did. Because when a woman detaches emotionally, sometimes the connection doesn't disappear. Sometimes that's when it finally becomes real. And honestly, I used to think people were exaggerating when they said this. Until I watched someone leave emotionally before she physically left. Until I watched a man pretend he wanted freedom, then slowly unravel inside the exact space he asked for. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just in small, humiliating ways. Opening her profile at 1:12 a.m. Listening to a voice note without replying. Driving nowhere specific because the apartment suddenly felt too quiet. Replaying one sentence she said 3 months ago like his body understood it later than his mind did. This isn't a story about becoming untouchable. It's not about winning some emotional game. It's about what actually happens when someone stops chasing love and starts protecting their peace instead. Because people don't always react when they still have access to you. Sometimes they react when they feel you emotionally leaving for real. And by then, the silence feels different. People think detachment looks dramatic. They think it happens after one final fight, one cruel sentence, one slammed door, one clean decision. But honestly, most of the time, it doesn't look like that at all. Sometimes, it looks like a woman standing in her kitchen staring at her phone while pasta boils over quietly behind her, reading the same dry message 3 times, trying to convince herself it doesn't hurt anymore. Sorry, been busy. That's it. No apology with weight in it. No curiosity. No softness. Just enough effort to technically keep the connection alive. And the worst part is she already knew that before she opened the message. Her body knew first. You can feel disappointment before you even fully process it mentally sometimes. It's strange. Your shoulders drop before your thoughts catch up. Your stomach tightens before the words even register emotionally. I think people underestimate how many relationships end emotionally long before they end physically. Because at first she stays. That's the confusing part. She still answers calls. Still sends memes. Still asks if he ate. Still says drive safe even when part of her feels stupid for continuing to care this much. But something starts changing underneath her behavior. Tiny things. She stops sending the second text if he ignores the first one. Stops rewriting paragraphs to sound less emotional. Stops checking if he watched her story immediately after posting it. Not all at once. Slowly. Almost invisibly. Like someone quietly removing pieces of themselves from a room. And honestly, sometimes the man doesn't notice immediately because externally she still looks present. She still shows up. But emotionally, she's getting tired in places he can't see yet. I remember this one woman describing it once in a comment section somewhere. She said, I didn't leave when I stopped loving him. I left when I realized loving him was making me feel lonely. That stayed with me longer than I expected. Because loneliness inside a relationship feels different from regular loneliness. It's more confusing. You start doubting yourself. Wondering if you're asking for too much. Wondering if maybe you're just emotional. Too sensitive. Too needy. Meanwhile, you're sitting there celebrating microscopic signs of affection like they're enough to survive on. A longer phone call, a quicker reply, one vulnerable moment at 1 a.m. that disappears again by morning. And the really painful part, sometimes he does care, just inconsistently. That's what keeps the attachment alive longer than it should. Because coldness is easier to process than inconsistency. At least coldness is clear. But inconsistency makes people stay emotionally hooked to potential, to who someone becomes for 15 minutes before disappearing emotionally again. And she feels herself adapting to it in ways she secretly hates. Checking timestamps, rereading old conversations when the current ones feel empty, pretending she doesn't mind the distance while her nervous system is quietly burning itself alive trying to understand it. Sometimes she even becomes calmer externally while feeling worse internally. That confuses people too. They think emotional exhaustion always looks emotional. It doesn't. Sometimes exhaustion looks like becoming quieter, less reactive, less expressive, less willing to explain the same wound for the 15th time. I think that's the stage people misunderstand most. Because from the outside, it can look like she's finally becoming less emotional. But internally, no. Internally, she's just reaching the point where sadness is starting to harden into resignation. And that shift is subtle, dangerously subtle. It happens in ordinary moments. Like when she sees his name pop up on her phone and doesn't immediately smile anymore. That realization alone can break your heart a little. Especially when you remember how excited you used to feel over the bare minimum. I knew someone once who said the exact moment she emotionally started detaching was incredibly small. Not dramatic at all. She was sitting in her car outside a grocery store after they had argued the night before. Nothing explosive. Just another circular conversation where she expressed a feeling and somehow ended up comforting him for having to hear it. And she realized she couldn't remember the last time she felt emotionally safe bringing things up. So she just sat there holding the steering wheel while the engine idled, staring at people walking into the store with shopping carts. And she had this terrifyingly calm thought. I think I'm done trying. Not done loving him. That's different. Done trying to force herself to feel emotionally okay with things that kept hurting. And honestly, I think a lot of women understand that exact moment. Because detachment usually begins as exhaustion before it becomes freedom. People romanticize detachment online now. They turn it into empowerment aesthetics and cold quotes and watch them come back energy. But real detachment is often much sadder than that in the beginning. It looks like crying less because you're too emotionally drained to keep crying at the same intensity. It looks like putting your phone face down instead of staring at it all night. It looks like deciding not to bring something up because you already know how the conversation will go. And that's the part that slowly changes the dynamic. Because when she stops emotionally chasing clarity, the energy shifts immediately. Even if he can't fully explain why. Men notice emotional withdrawal more than they admit. Not always consciously, but they feel changes in emotional access. The delayed replies, the missing warmth, the absence of emotional reaching. And ironically, sometimes that's when they start leaning in more. Not because they're evil, not because it's a game. Sometimes because people don't fully process what they have while constant access still exists. There's something deeply human and honestly kind of embarrassing about that. You adapt to someone loving you. You start assuming they'll still be there emotionally tomorrow. Then one day the emotional tone changes slightly and your body notices before your ego does. Her texts become shorter. Not rude. Just lighter. Less emotional weight in them. No hidden invitation for reassurance. And suddenly he's rereading them trying to figure out what changed. Everything okay? Yeah, just tired. And maybe she is tired, but not physically. Emotionally tired in that very specific way where you no longer want to beg for reciprocity from someone who technically keeps giving you just enough to stay hopeful. That kind of tiredness changes people quietly. She starts pouring energy elsewhere, sleeping earlier, talking less, cleaning the apartment at midnight because she needs somewhere to put the emotion. And still part of her hopes he notices. That's the contradiction nobody admits. Detachment is rarely clean in the beginning. Part of her is pulling away. Part of her is still watching for signs. Still wondering if maybe this version of distance will finally make him understand what her words couldn't. Sometimes she hates herself for that hope. You can feel it in tiny moments. Like opening his chat window, typing something vulnerable, then deleting it, locking the phone, unlocking it again 30 seconds later. There's something so human about that. The internal argument nobody sees. Don't text him. I know. You already explained this. I know. So why do you still want to? Because I miss who he is when he's emotionally open. That's the hardest part sometimes. Not missing the inconsistent version. Missing the glimpses. The version of him that held her face gently one night and made her feel completely safe for exactly 7 minutes before emotionally retreating again. The version that sounded terrified when she almost left. The version that existed just enough to keep her emotionally invested. But eventually something inside her starts changing. Not loudly, quietly. She stops trying to force connection where mutual emotional effort no longer exists naturally. And honestly, that's usually the beginning, not the ending. The beginning of emotionally returning to herself or spending too long abandoning her own feelings trying to maintain proximity to someone emotionally unavailable. And the strange thing is, that's often the exact moment he finally starts feeling the distance for real. It usually happens on an ordinary night. That's what makes it unsettling. Not during the huge fights. Not during the dramatic exits. Not even during the conversations where someone says, maybe we should stop doing this. No. The real shift usually happens quietly. In the middle of something painfully normal. A phone call. A drive home. A random Tuesday night where both people are technically still there but emotionally something begins slipping out of reach. And the strange thing is, he feels it immediately, even if he pretends not to. I think men notice emotional withdrawal faster than people realize. They just don't always know how to name what they're sensing. So instead, they do weird things. Check the conversation twice. Reread messages for hidden meaning. Become oddly restless for no obvious reason. But externally, they'll still act casual. That's the part that makes these dynamics so psychologically confusing. Because internally his nervous system is going. Something changed. Meanwhile externally he's replying, well yeah. I remember one story someone shared online that felt almost painfully specific. She said they were on the phone late at night like usual. Nothing dramatic had happened. He was talking about work, half distracted, slightly distant in the way emotionally avoidant people often are when life overwhelms them. And normally she would carry the emotional weight of the conversation. She would ask follow-up questions, fill silences, keep the warmth alive, notice his mood shifts before he even acknowledged them himself. But that night she stopped doing it. Not intentionally. She was just tired. Emotionally tired in that very particular way where your body no longer wants to perform emotional labor, it no longer feels safe inside. So when silence appeared on the phone, she let it stay there. And apparently he noticed almost instantly. Are you okay? Yeah. You seem quiet. I'm just listening. But she wasn't just listening. She was emotionally stepping back for the first time. Not to manipulate him, not to punish him, just because something inside her couldn't keep overextending the same way anymore. And somehow, that silence affected him more than all the previous emotional conversations combined. Because tension becomes louder when one person stops trying to manage it. That's the thing nobody talks about enough. Some relationships survive entirely because one person constantly keeps the emotional current moving. She smooths things over, reaches out first, reopens conversations, softens awkward moments before they fully land. So when she stops doing that, everything unspoken suddenly becomes visible. Even the pauses feel different. And men who are emotionally avoidant, or honestly just emotionally overwhelmed, often react strangely to that shift. Not always maturely. Sometimes they become more distant right when they feel her emotionally pulling away, which sounds backwards until you understand fear responses. Because closeness can trigger panic in people who secretly crave it. That contradiction ruins a lot of relationships. Part of him wants intimacy. Another part associates intimacy with pressure, exposure, expectation, responsibility. So the closer the emotional connection gets, the more his body starts looking for exits. Not consciously sometimes, just instinctively. He'll suddenly need space, become busy, reply slower, focus intensely on work for 3 straight days. Meanwhile, she's sitting there trying not to overthink why his energy changed overnight after one vulnerable moment. And honestly, sometimes even he doesn't fully understand why he's withdrawing. That's what makes this kind of emotional tension so sad. Neither person is fully lying. Neither person is fully honest either. I remember this one guy describing it in a way that felt brutally self-aware. He said, "The more I liked her, the weirder I acted." And unfortunately, that's real. Not healthy, not romantic, but real. Because emotional intimacy exposes people, especially people used to emotional self-protection. So when she emotionally starts stepping back, he suddenly feels the connection more clearly because the constant emotional access is no longer guaranteed. It's like his body realizes her absence before his ego catches up, and it shows up in embarrassing little ways. He checks if she viewed his story, notices her reply took 2 hours instead of 20 minutes, reads her short text 3 different times trying to figure out if she's upset. You good? Yeah. That yeah bothers him more than it should. Because before she would have explained, open up, reassured him. Now there's less emotional reaching in her responses, less invisible effort. And suddenly he feels strangely anxious in a dynamic he previously controlled through distance. But instead of saying, "I feel you pulling away, and it scares me," he'll say something like, "You've been acting different lately," which is technically true, just incomplete. And sometimes she notices the irony immediately, because she spent months trying to communicate emotional distance while he minimized it, until she finally became quieter. Now suddenly he feels it. That realization can make someone emotionally exhausted in ways that are hard to explain, especially women who spent a long time trying to emotionally articulate what they needed before eventually giving up. I think people imagine detachment looks cold. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes she still sounds soft, still cares deeply, still misses him after every conversation. But there's that hesitation now, a pause where openness used to be. You can hear it in tiny moments, like when he says, "I miss you," and instead of melting emotionally the way she used to, she goes quiet for half a second too long. Not because she doesn't care, because part of her no longer trusts consistency enough to emotionally relax into those words anymore. That half-second silence, He notices it, even if she covers it well after. Yeah, I miss you too. But something about it feels different, less emotionally surrendered. And honestly, that's usually the exact moment panic quietly starts entering the dynamic. Not dramatic panic, subtle panic, the kind that shows up as restlessness. He suddenly wants more attention from her while simultaneously struggling to offer emotional consistency himself. That contradiction becomes almost unbearable internally. And instead of addressing it directly, he starts orbiting emotionally, pulling close, pulling away, starting conversations, disappearing halfway through them emotionally. Sometimes late at night he'll suddenly miss her intensely, especially after distractions fade. That's another thing people rarely say out loud. Avoidance survives best during stimulation. Work, friends, noise, scrolling, constant movement. But at night, in silence, that's when emotional reality catches up, and the body remembers things the ego was avoiding all day. Her laugh, the tone shift in her voice earlier, the fact she no longer sent that extra goodnight text. Tiny things suddenly feel enormous, and he'll sit there pretending to watch something while checking if she's online. Not even necessarily wanting to text, just checking. Like reassurance through proximity. Like maybe if her little green dot is still there, the connection still is too. It's painfully human, and honestly kind of heartbreaking. Because sometimes, by this stage, she's already emotionally grieving the relationship while still inside it. That's why her energy feels different. People think detachment means someone no longer cares. That's not always true. Sometimes detachment is what happens when caring stops feeling emotionally safe, and the person on the other side senses that change instinctively, even if they can't explain it logically. I think that's why certain nights stay burnt into memory. Not because something dramatic happened, but because emotionally, something shifted permanently underneath the surface. Maybe it was the first night she stopped fighting for emotional closeness. Maybe it was the first night he realized her warmth wasn't unconditional. Maybe it was the first night silence stopped feeling comfortable and started feeling threatening. Whatever it was, both people usually remember it later, even if they never talk about it directly. And years afterward, weirdly enough, it's never the dramatic moments people replay the most. It's the tiny ones. The phone call that suddenly felt unfamiliar. The pause before "I love you." The night she stopped emotionally chasing the conversation forward. The strange ache in his chest after hanging up even though technically nothing bad happened. Internal dialogue starts quietly after that. She's fine. Is she? She said she was tired. Then why does this feel different? And maybe the deepest truth is this. Part of him already knows. He just doesn't want to admit that her emotional energy used to hold the connection together more than he realized. Until the night she finally loosened her grip. I don't think most people understand how delayed some men are emotionally. Not because they're evil. Not because they're incapable of love. Sometimes they genuinely do not feel the full emotional impact of something until after it's already changing or leaving. Which sounds insane when you're the person who's been emotionally processing the relationship in real time for months. Because from her perspective, she already tried. She already explained. Already cried. Already asked. Already softened her tone so she wouldn't overwhelm him. Meanwhile, he looked calm the entire time. Too calm sometimes. That kind of calm that makes someone feel emotionally abandoned while sitting right next to you. And then later, sometimes way later, he suddenly starts unraveling over the exact connection he acted emotionally detached from. That delay confuses people, especially women, because it feels contradictory. How are you fine? Well, I'm hurting, then suddenly devastated after I emotionally pull away. But honestly, emotional delay is real. A lot of men compartmentalize first and feel later, which sounds emotionally convenient until you realize it destroys intimacy. Because while she's trying to process the relationship together, he's often trying to stabilize himself internally first. Work, gym, distractions, routine, silence, and sometimes he genuinely believes he's handling things well because he's still functioning externally. That's the dangerous part. Functionality hides emotional disconnection extremely well. A man can go to work, answer emails, laugh with friends, pay bills. Meanwhile, emotionally, he hasn't fully processed a single vulnerable conversation from 3 weeks ago. It's just sitting somewhere inside him untouched, still active, still unresolved, and eventually it leaks out sideways. That's why some men become weirdly distant after intimacy. Not only physical intimacy, emotional intimacy too. Especially after moments that felt too real. A deep conversation, a vulnerable confession, a night where she looked at him in a way that made him feel fully seen. Sometimes he leaves those moments and immediately feels overstimulated emotionally, not peaceful, exposed, and instead of saying, "That affected me deeply," he'll suddenly become quieter, more distracted, harder to reach, which is brutal for the person on the receiving end, because she experiences intimacy as connection, while sometimes he experiences intimacy as emotional vulnerability followed by panic. And honestly, some men don't even realize they're doing it. They just suddenly feel an urge to create distance after closeness. Then later, once the distance exists, they miss the closeness they ran from. That contradiction destroys people emotionally. I remember hearing someone describe it like this. He kept saying he needed space, then the silence started eating him alive. That's exactly it. Because distance often delays emotional processing instead of eliminating it, especially for emotionally avoidant people. At first, space feels relieving. No emotional pressure. No difficult conversations. No feeling responsible for someone else's emotional world. Just quiet. Control. But after a while, the nervous system settles enough for reality to finally catch up. And suddenly random things start hitting him in convenient times. He hears a song she used to play in the car, finds one of her hair ties between couch cushions, sees a meme and instinctively goes to send it to her before remembering things feel weird now. Tiny things. Embarrassingly tiny things. That's what people don't tell you. The human heart is rarely destroyed by grand cinematic moments. Usually it's ordinary details. Opening the fridge and realizing nobody bought his favorite drink this week because she stopped thinking ahead for him. Looking at his phone after good news and realizing she's still the first person he wants to tell. Laying in bed feeling strangely restless because emotional reassurance used to exist there even when he barely acknowledged it. And unfortunately, a lot of men don't recognize emotional safety until it's unstable. Not because they don't care. Sometimes because consistency becomes invisible when you're used to receiving it. Her warmth becomes background noise. Her emotional effort becomes expected. Her patience becomes assumed. Until suddenly it changes. Then his body notices immediately. I think that's why emotionally delayed regret feels so intense. Because when it finally arrives, it arrives all at once. Not gradually like it did for her. She suffered slowly. He suffers suddenly. That's the difference. She cried during the relationship. He cries after the emotional distance becomes undeniable. And neither person understands the timing of the other. That creates so much resentment. Because from her perspective, why couldn't you care like this when I was trying? And from his perspective, I didn't realize how serious this was until I felt you emotionally leaving. Which honestly sounds pathetic sometimes, even to him. Especially during those late night moments where self-awareness starts slipping through. Like sitting in the dark staring at old messages. Not even knowing what he's looking for exactly. Proof maybe. Proof she really loved him. Proof he didn't imagine the connection. Proof he didn't ruin something meaningful through emotional avoidance and ego and fear. And men rarely talk about how shame affects them emotionally. That's another hidden layer. Sometimes after hurting someone they genuinely care about, they avoid harder because shame makes emotional vulnerability feel unbearable. So instead of moving closer, they disappear further. Not because they feel nothing, because feeling too much suddenly makes them feel inadequate. That's why some men become emotionally inconsistent after vulnerable moments. One night they're deeply open, emotionally available, present. The next day they act almost cold. And the woman sitting there experiences emotional whiplash trying to understand what changed overnight. Usually nothing changed overnight. The intimacy just finally reached him. Late. That's the strange rhythm of emotional delay. The feeling arrives after the moment passes. Sometimes days later. Sometimes weeks later. And by then she's already emotionally exhausted from trying to interpret mixed signals. I think people underestimate how physically emotional avoidance shows up too. It's not always conscious manipulation. Sometimes his body literally reacts before his mind forms language around it. Restlessness, shallow breathing, need for distraction, sudden urge to focus on tasks. That's why some men start obsessively cleaning, working, organizing, gaming, driving, lifting weights, anything really after emotionally intense experiences. Movement helps them avoid emotional stillness. Because stillness forces feeling. I knew someone once who admitted he reorganized his entire apartment after a vulnerable conversation with a woman he loved. Not because he cared about the apartment. Because emotionally, he felt completely dysregulated afterward and needed somewhere to put the energy. He said he spent 30 minutes wiping down kitchen counters that were already clean. That detail stayed with me because of how painfully human it was. People imagine emotional avoidance looking confident. Sometimes it looks like a man standing in his kitchen at 1:17 a.m. pretending he suddenly cares deeply about countertop stains because he doesn't know how to process intimacy. And meanwhile, she's at home overthinking his emotional withdrawal, thinking she did something wrong. That's the tragic part. Two people silently reacting to the same emotional intensity in opposite ways. One moves closer for reassurance. One moves away for regulation. Neither fully understands the other. And the silence between them starts filling with projection. She thinks, he doesn't care. He thinks, I'm overwhelmed and I don't know why. But he usually doesn't say that part out loud. Because a lot of men were never taught how to articulate emotional overwhelm without feeling weak or exposed. So instead they say things like, I just need space. I've been stressed. I don't know what I want. And sometimes those statements are partially true, but incomplete. The deeper truth is usually messier. Part of him wants closeness desperately. Part of him associates closeness with losing emotional control. Part of him misses her intensely. Part of him resents how emotionally affected he becomes around her. That contradiction creates behavior that looks irrational from the outside. Because sometimes he genuinely loves her and still withdraws. Sometimes he misses her while actively ignoring her messages. Sometimes he checks her profile while pretending not to care. Sometimes he feels relief after creating distance. then grief immediately afterward. Human beings are contradictory like that, especially emotionally wounded ones. And honestly, by the time he fully understands what she meant to him emotionally, she's often already halfway detached, trying to survive the inconsistency. That's why the timing feels cursed sometimes. She wanted emotional clarity while she was still open. He found emotional clarity after the silence became unbearable. And somewhere inside that gap, the relationship starts breaking. Not dramatically, quietly, through delayed realizations, missed emotional timing, and to people loving each other through completely incompatible nervous system responses. I think one of the saddest realizations in relationships is understanding how much emotional performance was happening the entire time. Not fake love, real love, but managed love, carefully edited love, emotionally exhausted love trying to remain easy to receive. Because sometimes women start shrinking themselves emotionally long before they leave. Not dramatically, quietly. They soften their tone, swallow reactions, rewrite texts 3 times to avoid sounding too emotional, pretend things are okay because they're tired of feeling like every vulnerable conversation turns into conflict or withdrawal. And after a while, something strange happens. She becomes emotionally hyper-aware of his comfort while completely abandoning her own. That's usually the beginning of emotional burnout. Not because she stopped loving him, because loving him started requiring self-erasure. And honestly, most men don't fully notice this while it's happening. Because externally, she still seems loving. She still checks if he got home safe, still listens to his problems, still reaches for his hand in public, still remembers small things about his life. But internally, she's becoming more careful, less natural, more emotionally monitored. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from constantly trying to present your feelings in the least threatening way possible. Especially when you love someone emotionally avoidant. You start treating basic emotional needs like dangerous subjects, timing everything carefully. Maybe not tonight. He's stressed. Maybe not after work. Maybe not during the weekend. Maybe I'll bring it up gently. Maybe I sounded too intense last time. And slowly communication stops feeling emotionally honest. It becomes strategic. That changes people. I remember hearing someone describe it like this. I became more focused on delivering my feelings correctly than actually feeling safe expressing them. That sentence honestly hurt to hear. Because so many people live there without realizing it. Especially women who love deeply, but slowly become emotionally over-responsible inside relationships. She starts managing his reactions before he even has them. If he gets quiet, she fills the silence. If he pulls away, she reassures him. If he hurts her, she explains her pain gently enough to protect him from feeling ashamed about causing it. And for a while she tells herself this is love. Compromise. Patience. Understanding. Until one day her body starts reacting differently. That's the thing people don't talk about enough. The body notices emotional exhaustion before the mind fully accepts it. She stops feeling relaxed during conversations, starts feeling slight anxiety before opening his messages, feels emotionally tired after interactions that used to make her feel connected. And still, she keeps trying. That's the heartbreaking part. People imagine women detach suddenly. Usually they overstay emotionally first, by months sometimes, trying to recover intimacy, trying to recreate emotional safety, trying to explain the same ache in different words, hoping this version finally lands. And eventually something inside her just slows down, not out of revenge, out of depletion. She stops over-explaining. That's usually one of the first visible shifts. Before, she would have sent paragraphs trying to emotionally clarify herself. Now, never mind. It's okay. Don't worry about it. And men often misread that stage completely. They think, oh good, less conflict, without realizing the emotional intimacy is quietly dying underneath the silence. Because women don't always stop caring first. Sometimes they stop believing they'll be emotionally met. There's a difference, a painful difference. And honestly, when she stops emotionally performing love, something changes in the entire dynamic. She no longer rushes to repair emotional distance instantly. No longer panics when communication shifts. No longer sacrifices her emotional reality to preserve temporary closeness. And weirdly, that's often when he starts feeling drawn toward her more intensely. Not because she's playing hard to get, because emotional overextension disappeared from her energy. People can feel when someone stops gripping emotionally, even unconsciously. Before, her attention carried urgency. Now there's space around her, and space changes attraction. I think some men mistake emotional labor for permanence. They assume she'll always keep the emotional connection alive because she always has before, until one day she doesn't, and the silence feels unfamiliar suddenly. Not angry, not dramatic, just absent. That absence becomes loud, especially for men who relied on her emotional consistency more than they realized. I remember this one story where a woman said her boyfriend noticed her detachment over something incredibly small. She stopped sending follow-up texts. That was it. Before, if he disappeared for hours, she'd reopen the conversation eventually. Send another meme, another question, another emotional bridge. Then one day she stopped, and apparently he noticed almost immediately. Not consciously at first, but he became restless, started texting more randomly, sending things that didn't really need responses. Almost like his nervous system was checking whether emotional access still existed. And she noticed it too. That's the strange thing about detachment. It changes the emotional rhythm between two people. Suddenly the person who used to chase clarity becomes quieter, and the person who relied on that emotional pursuit starts feeling unsettled. Not because they're manipulative, because human beings adapt to emotional patterns. When one person always reaches, the other unconsciously relaxes. Until the reaching stops, then everything feels different. And honestly, sometimes that shift scares him more than her tears ever did. Because tears still meant attachment, still meant emotional investment, still meant she was fighting for the connection. Calm detachment feels different, especially when it's real. There's something deeply unsettling about realizing someone who once poured emotion into you is now emotionally conserving themselves instead. You can feel the restraint, the way she pauses before responding, the way she no longer rushes to emotionally reassure, the way conversations end naturally now instead of stretching because she keeps trying to preserve closeness. And the tragic part is, sometimes she still loves him deeply during all of this. That contradiction destroys people emotionally, because detachment doesn't always mean the feelings disappeared. Sometimes the feelings stayed too long. That's why she becomes quieter with grief instead of louder. I think some women secretly hope the emotional shift will finally make him understand what exhaustion feels like. Not intentionally, not as punishment, just because words stopped working. And honestly, sometimes it does wake him up, but usually later than she needed. That's the pattern that hurts most. He notices the absence of her emotional labor after she's already tired of performing it. Suddenly, he misses her warmth, her attentiveness, the way she emotionally held conversations together. But he didn't fully notice the weight of those things while they were happening naturally every day. Human beings are tragically adaptive like that. We normalize what consistently loves us until it changes. Then suddenly every missing detail becomes visible. The good morning texts feel shorter. The emotional softness feels dimmer. The energy feels less available. And meanwhile, she's sitting there feeling both relief and grief at the exact same time. That emotional contradiction is so real. Relief because she's finally stopping the exhausting cycle of emotional overfunctioning. Grief because part of her still wishes she didn't have to. That's what people don't understand about emotional detachment. It's rarely empowerment in the beginning. Sometimes it feels like heartbreak mixed with survival. Like putting down something heavy you desperately wanted to keep carrying. And there are moments where she almost goes back. That's important too. Sometimes at night she rereads old conversations. Starts typing vulnerable messages again. Misses the early version of him. Misses the version of herself that still believed emotional consistency would eventually arrive. Then something stops her. Not coldness. Memory. Memory of how emotionally lonely she became trying to love someone who only partially opened their heart. So she puts the phone down again. Not because she no longer cares. Because caring without reciprocity started costing too much internally. And ironically, that's usually when her energy becomes magnetic again. Not because she's trying to attract anyone. Because she's finally becoming emotionally present with herself instead of constantly monitoring someone else's emotional availability. People can feel that shift. The groundedness. The emotional self-containment. The absence of desperation. Even him. Especially him. Because for the first time, she's no longer performing love in order to keep connection alive. She's letting reality speak for itself. At some point, silence stops feeling peaceful. It starts feeling loud. Not immediately. At first, he enjoys it. Or thinks he does. No emotionally heavy conversations. No pressure to explain himself. No feeling like someone is emotionally watching every shift in his energy. Just space. Freedom. He tells himself this is what he wanted. And maybe part of him really did want it. That's the uncomfortable truth about emotional avoidance. Sometimes distance genuinely feels relieving in the beginning. Especially after prolonged emotional tension. So he leans into the silence at first. Replies slower. Keeps himself busy. Acts emotionally casual. Maybe he even tells his friends, "We're just taking space. It's not that serious. I think we both need room." And externally, he almost believes it. But the body is strange. Because sometimes emotional reality arrives in fragments. Quietly. Inconveniently. At random hours. Not during the dramatic moments. During ordinary ones. That's when the silence starts talking. I think people imagine grief as obvious. Crying. Breaking down. Public sadness. But honestly, some of the deepest emotional realization happens in tiny invisible moments nobody would ever photograph. Like standing in line at a gas station and instinctively reaching for the snack she always liked before remembering she's not in the car anymore. Or hearing a laugh across a restaurant that sounds vaguely like hers and feeling your chest tighten before your brain even processes why. It's embarrassing sometimes. The way the body remembers people, especially after pretending not to care. And men don't always admit how much emotional attachment lives inside routine. That's why silence hits late. Because routine delays grief. You don't notice absence immediately when distraction is still active. Work keeps moving. Friends keep talking. The phone keeps buzzing. But eventually there's a gap. A pause. And suddenly he notices she's missing from places she used to live inside naturally. The morning text that used to arrive before his alarm. The random voice note. The way she checked whether he got home safely even after arguments. Tiny things. Tiny things become devastating when they disappear quietly. And the cruel part is, most of these details felt ordinary while they were happening. That's what people regret later. Not appreciating emotional consistency while it was still accessible. I remember someone once describing heartbreak as realizing how much love existed in the background of your life after the background goes silent. That felt painfully accurate. Because sometimes her love was hidden inside mundane details he barely registered consciously at the time. The extra charger she kept in her bag for him. Remembering how he takes his coffee. Sending him photos of random things during the day because she wanted him involved in her internal world. Those things don't feel enormous in the moment until they stop happening. Then suddenly silence becomes emotionally physical. You can feel it in rooms, especially at night. Nighttime changes everything. Daytime allows performance. At night, the nervous system starts telling the truth. I think that's why emotionally avoidant people often struggle most after midnight. There are fewer distractions available then. No meetings, no noise, no movement, just memory. And memory becomes vicious in silence. That's when he starts replaying things he ignored emotionally in real time. The tone in her voice during that last phone call. The exhausted look she had when she said, "I'm tired." Not physically tired, emotionally tired. And maybe he understood that intellectually at the time. But now he feels it. Late. That delayed realization has ruined so many people emotionally. Especially men who were conditioned to suppress emotional processing until silence cornered them into it. So now he's sitting alone at 1:43 a.m. scrolling through old messages he pretended didn't matter, reading ordinary conversations like they contain hidden answers. And honestly, sometimes they do. You can see emotional withdrawal happening in hindsight. The shorter replies, the reduced warmth, the missing emotional enthusiasm. But while it was happening live, he kept assuming there would be more time. That's the danger of emotional permanence. People unconsciously believe emotionally available people will remain emotionally available forever, until one day they don't. And then the silence becomes unbearable. Not dramatic silence, subtle silence, the kind that follows him through everyday life. He opens Instagram and notices she stopped watching his stories immediately. Sees her online, but not reaching out anymore. Feels weirdly disappointed when there's no message from her waiting. And suddenly he's checking his phone more often than he used to. Not because she's texting, because she's not. That's the irony. Sometimes absence creates more obsession than presence ever did. Not because human beings enjoy suffering, because uncertainty activates emotional awareness, especially after emotional access changes. I think some men don't realize how emotionally attached they are until the emotional reassurance disappears. Then suddenly every little shift feels huge. She used to send me things. She used to ask about my day. She used to care if I disappeared emotionally. Now she's quieter, still kind, still there maybe, but less emotionally available. And his nervous system notices immediately, even if his ego tries to dismiss it. She's probably just busy. Don't overthink it. You wanted space anyway. Did he? Partially. That's the complicated answer nobody likes admitting. Part of him wanted relief from emotional intensity. Another part wanted her emotional presence to remain untouched while he figured himself out. Human beings are selfish like that sometimes. We want freedom without consequence, distance without disconnection, space without emotional loss. But emotional energy changes, when it stops being reciprocated consistently. And eventually, she stopped reaching the same way. Not dramatically, quietly. That quietness haunts him later, because silence leaves room for projection. Now, his mind fills in the emotional gaps she used to fill with reassurance. Is she okay? Is she talking to someone else? Does she still care? Did I wait too long? And unfortunately, emotional realization often arrives after the other person becomes emotionally exhausted. That timing feels almost cruel, because now he wants emotional closeness more intensely, right when she's finally learning how to survive without it. I think that's why emotionally avoidant men sometimes appear more emotionally expressive after distance appears. Not because the love suddenly materialized, because fear did. Fear of loss, fear of replacement, fear that emotional access is no longer guaranteed, and fear exposes attachment fast, especially in silence. That's when emotionally awkward behavior starts happening. Opening her profile repeatedly without interacting, typing messages then deleting them, checking old photos late at night, replaying voice notes just to hear her tone again, not even necessarily to reconnect. Sometimes just to feel emotionally near her for a minute. That's the part people don't admit publicly. How humiliating longing can feel after pretending to be emotionally detached, especially for men who built their identity around emotional control. Now, suddenly, he's emotionally affected by tiny things he can't explain rationally, like seeing her favorite drink at the grocery store, or driving past a street she used to live on and feeling immediate heaviness in his chest. The body keeps emotional records the mind tries to minimize, and silence amplifies all of it. That's why the nights become strange. He starts remembering details he ignored before. The way she rubbed her thumb against her coffee cup when anxious. The look on her face when she realized he emotionally checked out during conversations. The softness in her voice during moments he barely responded to because vulnerability made him uncomfortable. And shame starts mixing with longing. That combination is brutal, because now the memories don't just hurt. They accuse him quietly, not in a cruel way, just honestly. He starts seeing where she tried, where she reached, where she stayed emotionally open longer than he did. And suddenly silence isn't peaceful anymore. It's confrontational, not because she's saying anything, because she stopped saying everything. That's what changes the emotional atmosphere completely. Her silence no longer feels like waiting. It feels like withdrawal, real withdrawal. And humans can sense when emotional energy leaves for real. Even emotionally avoidant humans, especially them. Because once her emotional pursuit disappears, he has nothing left to react against. No reassurance, no emotional chasing, no constant proof she still cares. Just space, and space forces self-confrontation eventually. That's the thing about silence. At first it feels empty, then slowly, it starts saying everything nobody wanted to hear while the relationship was still loud enough to avoid the truth. I think one of the hardest truths to admit is this. Sometimes he knew she mattered. He just didn't know what to do with how deeply she affected him. That's the part people oversimplify online. They turn emotional avoidance into this cartoon version of a cold man who feels nothing and enjoys hurting people. And honestly, sometimes people do act cruelly. Sometimes they're selfish. Sometimes they absolutely know they're causing damage and keep doing it anyway. But a lot of emotional avoidance is uglier than that. Less powerful, more emotionally immature, more like a man panicking internally while pretending he's completely unaffected. Which sounds ridiculous until you've actually watched it happen in real life. Because emotionally avoidant behavior often looks strangely contradictory. He misses her then ignores her message. He wants closeness, then withdraws right after intimacy. He craves emotional safety, then sabotages at the moment it becomes real. And the worst part, sometimes he hates himself while doing it. Not enough to stop immediately, but enough to feel ashamed afterward. I remember someone once saying, he acted like he didn't care, but his entire body reacted every time I pulled away. That's emotional avoidance in one sentence. The mouth says one thing, the nervous system says another, and people stuck in those patterns become exhausting to love because they send mixed signals even when their feelings are genuine, especially after emotionally intimate moments. That's when avoidance gets exposed most clearly. Like after a really vulnerable conversation where both people finally open up. Maybe she tells him something painful from her past. Maybe he admits he's scared of losing her. Maybe they spend one rare night emotionally honest with each other. And for a few hours, everything feels real, connected, soft, safe. Then suddenly the next day, he becomes distant. Shorter texts, less emotional warmth, weird emotional static where closeness existed yesterday. That shift confuses her every single time. Because from her perspective, we finally connected emotionally, why are you pulling away? But from his internal experience, that intimacy overwhelmed him. Not because it was bad, because it was real. That's what people miss. Emotionally avoidant men are not always avoiding the person. Sometimes they're avoiding the emotional exposure itself. The feeling of being emotionally seen too clearly. Especially if vulnerability was never emotionally safe for them growing up. So closeness creates contradiction internally. Part of him relaxes into it. Another part immediately starts searching for emotional escape routes. And honestly, those escape routes are often embarrassingly transparent. Suddenly, he becomes busy, needs alone time, starts hyper-focusing on work, replies emotionally flat after being deeply affectionate the night before. Sometimes he'll even create small unnecessary tension subconsciously just to regain emotional distance. Not because he consciously wants to ruin things. Because emotional vulnerability can make emotionally avoidant people feel trapped even inside relationships they deeply want. That contradiction is devastating for both people. Especially the woman trying to understand why intimacy keeps getting followed by emotional withdrawal. I think one of the most painful dynamics is when she starts blaming herself for his dysregulation. Maybe I was too emotional. Maybe I opened up too much. Maybe I overwhelmed him. Meanwhile, he's sitting there confused by his own reactions too. That's the embarrassing part nobody says out loud. Sometimes, emotionally avoidant men genuinely don't understand themselves while it's happening. They just feel emotionally overstimulated and instinctively create space. Then later, after the distance exists, they start missing the exact closeness they ran from. Human beings are deeply contradictory under emotional stress, especially men taught to associate emotional control with safety. Because intimacy removes control. Real intimacy exposes dependency, attachment, fear, need. A lot of men can handle casual attention, surface-level connection, physical intimacy without deep emotional exposure. But when emotional attachment becomes undeniable, that's when avoidance behaviors often intensify. And honestly, some of the behaviors are painfully immature. Like joking during serious emotional conversations because sincerity suddenly feels unbearable. She says, "Sometimes I feel like you emotionally disappear when things get close." And instead of answering honestly, he smirks awkwardly and says, "You're dramatic." Not because he fully dismisses her, because he feels emotionally cornered. Humor becomes defense. Deflection becomes regulation. And later, alone, He replays the conversation in his head, realizing she was partially right. But by then the moment has passed. That's another tragic thing about emotional avoidance. Clarity often arrives in private, too late to help the actual interaction. So externally he looked detached. Internally he's driving around at midnight replaying one sentence she said 3 hours ago. That duality is real. I've seen men act emotionally numb in person, then spiral privately afterward once the stimulation fades. Especially at night. Night exposes emotional truth in people who suppress feelings all day. That's when the internal dialogue starts. She's asking for too much. Is she? She just wants reassurance. Why does that make you panic? I don't know. That I don't know is real more often than people realize. Because emotional avoidance is sometimes less about lack of love and more about lack of emotional tolerance. Some people literally do not know how to remain emotionally open without becoming dysregulated internally. So they pull away to regain equilibrium. But unfortunately, distance also creates grief. So now he's trapped between two discomforts. The discomfort of closeness and the discomfort of losing it. That creates behavior that looks irrational from the outside. Because sometimes he genuinely feels safest with her emotionally, while simultaneously feeling overwhelmed by how much he needs her presence. And needing someone can feel terrifying to emotionally guarded people, especially men raised around emotional suppression. I think people underestimate how deeply shame affects masculine emotional behavior too. A lot of men feel intense shame around emotional dependency. So instead of saying, "I need you," they become colder, more independent, more emotionally unavailable. Not because the need disappeared, because they're trying to regain emotional control over it. That's why some men become strangely distant immediately after deeply intimate moments. The closeness activated attachment. The attachment activated fear. The fear activated withdrawal. And meanwhile, she's left emotionally confused, trying to understand why tenderness keeps turning into distance. I remember hearing a woman say, "He would hold me like he was terrified to lose me, then emotionally disappear for 3 days." That sentence honestly explains so many modern relationships. Because emotionally avoidant behavior isn't usually consistent coldness. Consistency would actually be easier to process. It's inconsistency that emotionally hooks people. The moments of openness, the flashes of vulnerability, the nights where he suddenly says exactly what she needed to hear. Then the emotional retreat afterward. That cycle creates emotional addiction in relationships. Hope followed by confusion. Closeness followed by absence. And eventually she starts living in anticipation instead of stability. Waiting for emotional availability to return. Trying to decode his moods. Monitoring small shifts in tone. That hypervigilance exhausts people, especially women who naturally move toward emotional repair while he moves toward emotional distance. And honestly, sometimes he knows exactly what he's doing while still feeling unable to stop. That's another uncomfortable truth. Self-awareness alone doesn't immediately heal emotional avoidance. A man can fully recognize, "I'm pushing away someone I deeply care about," and still continue doing it because vulnerability feels terrifying at a nervous system level. That's why some men become emotionally softer after separation. Distance removes immediate intimacy pressure. Now he can miss her safely. Longing from afar feels easier than sustaining emotional closeness in real time, which is heartbreaking when you think about it. Because often she wanted emotional presence while she was still standing in front of him. But he accesses his deepest feelings after she emotionally steps away. That timing ruins people, especially when regret finally starts arriving clearly. And regret doesn't always look dramatic either. Sometimes it looks humiliatingly ordinary. Opening her chat window every night without sending anything. Listening to old voice notes. Staring at her contact name while pretending not to care during the day. Or suddenly remembering tiny details months later. The way she rubbed circles on his back when he was stressed. The way she looked emotionally defeated the last time she said, "I just want consistency." That word echoes differently later. Consistency. Because deep down, he wanted consistency too. He just didn't know how to emotionally sustain it without feeling exposed, responsible, vulnerable, dependent. And by the time he understands that fully, she's often already exhausted from carrying the emotional weight of both people alone. I think the internet lies about detachment sometimes. Or maybe not lies exactly. Maybe it just edits out the ugly parts. The shaking hand before you decide not to send the text. The weird emptiness after finally choosing yourself. The way grief still sneaks into completely ordinary moments even after you know leaving emotionally was necessary. People online make detachment look clean, elegant, powerful, almost cinematic. Like one day she simply levels up emotionally and never looks back. But real detachment, a lot of the time it looks like crying quietly while folding laundry because his sweatshirt accidentally fell out of the dryer and your body reacted before your mind could stop it. It looks messy, contradictory, human, because sometimes she detached to survive emotionally, not because she became completely healed. That's an important difference. I think women especially put pressure on themselves to become emotionally untouchable after heartbreak. Like, if they still miss him sometimes, they've failed somehow. But healing isn't linear when the connection was emotionally significant. And honestly, some of the deepest grief happens after the detachment starts. Not before. Because before detachment, there's still hope. Hope delays mourning. As long as she still believes. Maybe he'll understand. Maybe consistency will come later. Maybe this version of him is temporary. Her nervous system stays emotionally attached to possibility. But once she starts emotionally letting go for real, that's when reality begins settling into the body. And reality hurts differently. I remember someone describing it once like this. When I stopped chasing him emotionally, I finally had enough silence to hear how lonely I'd been. That sentence stayed with me. Because emotional overfunctioning creates noise. Constant thinking. Constant analyzing. Constant emotional management. Detachment removes some of that activity. And suddenly grief becomes audible underneath it. Now, she notices things she was too emotionally preoccupied to fully feel before. How anxious she became waiting for replies. How much she abandoned her own emotional needs trying to maintain closeness. How often she accepted partial connection because losing him completely felt worse. And honestly, that realization can be humiliating. Not because she was weak. Because love makes intelligent people tolerate emotional confusion longer than they expected. Especially when the connection wasn't entirely bad. That's another thing people oversimplify. Some relationships hurt deeply because they contained real tenderness too. Real chemistry. Real emotional intimacy in flashes. Real moments where she genuinely felt loved. That's why detachment becomes so emotionally complicated. She's not grieving fantasy entirely. She's grieving inconsistency. The potential. The almost. The version of him that appeared sometimes and made everything feel emotionally safe for a few beautiful hours before disappearing again. And unfortunately, the nervous system gets attached to intermittent emotional reward very easily. Those small moments become emotionally addictive. The random vulnerable phone call. The sudden emotional openness at midnight. The rare day where he fully showed up emotionally and she felt chosen without confusion. Those moments stay in the body. even after she logically knows the relationship became unsustainable. That's why detachment often feels emotionally uneven. Some mornings she feels calm, clear, almost free. Then suddenly she hears a song in a grocery store and has to stand still for a second because memory hit her physically. Not even necessarily because she wants him back. Just because grief is strange like that. The body remembers emotional attachment through association. Smells, music, certain streets at night. And honestly, sometimes the grief arrives at inconveniently small moments. Like reaching for her phone after something funny happens before realizing there's nobody she instinctively wants to tell anymore. Or waking up from a dream where everything felt emotionally normal again for 5 seconds before reality returns. That feeling is brutal, especially in the morning. There's something uniquely painful about the first few seconds after waking up when your nervous system hasn't fully remembered the emotional loss yet. Then it does. And the heaviness returns all at once. I think people underestimate how physically heartbreak lives inside the body too. The exhaustion, the emotional numbness, the random anxiety spikes. Even after she detaches, her nervous system may still react to him automatically. That doesn't mean she's failing. It means she's human. And honestly, sometimes she still checks. That's the embarrassing truth nobody posts about proudly. Sometimes she still looks at his profile, still wonders if he misses her, still rereads old messages trying to understand where things shifted emotionally. Not constantly, maybe. Not obsessively the way she used to, but occasionally, usually late at night, usually during emotionally vulnerable moments, usually when loneliness and memory accidentally collide. And afterward she feels frustrated with herself. I thought I was past this. Why do I still care? Why does one memory still affect me this much? Because emotional detachment isn't an on-off switch. It's more like slowly teaching your body that love should not require emotional self-abandonment. And that lesson takes time, especially after emotionally intense connections. I think one of the hardest parts is grieving someone while simultaneously understanding why distance became necessary. That creates emotional contradiction constantly. Part of her misses him deeply. Another part remembers exactly how emotionally unstable the relationship made her feel. Part of her wants to hear his voice again. Another part remembers crying after conversations that should have felt safe. That internal split exhausts people, especially women who keep trying to force themselves into certainty before they're emotionally there. Sometimes she misses him and feels relieved he's gone at the exact same time. That emotional duality is real and confusing. There are moments where she genuinely smiles again, starts reconnecting with herself, feels emotionally lighter. Then randomly she remembers a tiny detail about him that completely disarms her emotionally. The way he rubbed his eyes when tired. The rare softness in his voice when he let his guard down. The night he looked at her like he almost wanted to stay emotionally open forever. Those memories hurt precisely because they were real. That's why detachment isn't always empowerment. Sometimes it's grief with boundaries. Sometimes it's love learning not to destroy itself trying to save someone emotionally unavailable. And honestly, there are nights where she almost breaks her own silence. That's important too. People romanticize no contact like emotionally detached people never struggle. But real life isn't that polished. Sometimes she types the message, stares at it, deletes it, types another version, deletes that too. The internal dialogue becomes exhausting. Don't do this again. I know. You already know how this cycle ends. I know. Then why do you still miss him? Because missing someone doesn't disappear the exact moment they become unhealthy for you. That's the truth people don't want to admit because it sounds less empowering. Love doesn't always leave cleanly. Sometimes it leaves in layers, slowly, unevenly, and emotionally intelligent women still struggle sometimes too. They still romanticize memories occasionally, still revisit old emotional moments in their head, still wonder whether things could have worked under different circumstances, especially when the relationship lacked closure. And finished emotional experiences haunt people differently, and emotionally avoidant dynamics create massive amounts of unfinished emotional energy. Things unsaid, needs unmet, conversations interrupted by withdrawal. So even after detachment starts, part of her still mentally revisits the connection, searching for emotional resolution. That's human, not weakness. Human. And honestly, I think the strongest thing she eventually does isn't stop loving him. It's stopping the cycle of abandoning herself to maintain emotional proximity. That's different. Very different. Because there may always be a part of her that feels tenderness when she thinks about him. Especially the vulnerable parts of him. The emotionally guarded parts he rarely showed anyone else. But eventually she realizes empathy cannot replace reciprocity. Understanding someone's wounds doesn't heal the damage caused by inconsistency. And that realization changes her slowly. Not into someone colder, into someone more honest with herself. She starts recognizing the emotional cost of waiting for potential to become reality. And maybe she still grieves sometimes. Maybe certain nights still ache unexpectedly. Maybe she still misses the version of him that appeared during rare moments of emotional openness. But now there's awareness underneath the longing. Awareness of what the relationship actually felt like consistently, not just during emotionally intoxicating moments. And that awareness becomes the beginning of real detachment. Not performative detachment. Not emotionally numb detachment. Just a quieter kind. The kind where she finally stops trying to convince herself that love alone can stabilize a connection built on emotional inconsistency, even if part of her still wishes it could have. The strange thing about regret is that it rarely arrives all at once. It leaks in slowly, through memory, through silence, through tiny moments that don't seem important until suddenly they are. And usually the version of her he misses most no longer existed by the end. That's the painful part. Because when he thinks about her now, he remembers warmth, her patience, her emotional openness, the softness in the way she looked at him before exhaustion started changing her face. But he forgets sometimes that version of her was carrying a weight he barely acknowledged while it was happening. Not maliciously, maybe. Just carelessly, emotionally inconsistently. And honestly, inconsistency can drain someone more deeply than obvious cruelty. Because at least cruelty gives the nervous system clarity. Inconsistency keeps hope alive while slowly exhausting the person holding it. So she kept showing up emotionally even while becoming more tired internally. That's the version he remembers now. The woman who still tried. Still listened to him talk about work after her own emotional needs when ignored for weeks. Still reached for his hand in public even after crying privately the night before. Still smiled during dinner while mentally debating whether the relationship was slowly breaking her heart. People rarely notice emotional exhaustion while it's happening in real time, especially when the exhausted person is still functioning, still loving, still available, still performing normalcy. But something changes in a woman when she becomes emotionally tired for too long. The light in her attention dims slightly, not dramatically, just enough that later, once she's gone emotionally, he remembers the difference and realizes it started earlier than he admitted to himself. I think men often remember women in emotional snapshots. Specific moments frozen in time. The way she looked sitting in the passenger seat at night. The sound of her laugh, when she forgot to guard herself emotionally, the softness in her voice when she was half asleep. And after distance enters the relationship, those memories become almost haunting. Not because they're extraordinary, because they were ordinary. That's what makes them hurt. The domestic intimacy of someone who genuinely loved you quietly. I knew someone once who said the thing that finally broke him emotionally wasn't losing her technically. It was walking through a grocery store alone months later and realizing nobody knew the weird little things he liked anymore. Nobody remembered which cereal brand he pretended not to care about. Nobody texted, "Do you need anything from the store?" That realization destroyed him more than the actual breakup conversation did. Because grief becomes real inside routine, not speeches. Routine. And the version of her he misses most existed inside those routines naturally. She anticipated him emotionally, remembered details, adjusted herself around his moods. And honestly, she was probably already exhausted while doing all of it. That's the part regret reveals too late. You start recognizing emotional labor after it disappears. And once it's gone, the relationship suddenly looks different in hindsight. He remembers the last few months and notices things he minimized emotionally at the time. The way she became quieter after expressing her feelings. The pause before she answered certain questions. The tired smile she gave when he apologized without actually changing anything. And shame starts mixing into the grief. Not dramatic shame, quiet shame. The kind that hits during random moments. Driving home at night. Standing in the shower too long. Lying awake replaying ordinary conversations that suddenly sound different now. Especially the moments where she was indirectly asking for emotional reassurance and he responded with distance instead. That realization is brutal. Because hindsight gives emotional context to things he dismissed in real time. Now, suddenly, he understands why she looked disappointed after certain conversations. Why her energy slowly changed. Why her affection started feeling more cautious. And honestly, some men don't fully understand what emotional depletion looks like until they lose access to the woman before the exhaustion changed her completely. That's why memory becomes distorted too. He misses the earlier version of her. The emotionally available version. The emotionally hopeful version. But what he forgets sometimes is that version was slowly disappearing because the relationship stopped feeling emotionally safe enough for her to remain fully open. And she probably fought hard internally to stay soft. That's another thing people underestimate. Softness takes energy. Emotional openness takes safety. Women don't usually become guarded randomly. Usually something exhausted them there slowly. Repeated disappointment. Emotional inconsistency. Feeling emotionally alone inside the relationship. And by the time he notices her emotional withdrawal clearly, she's often already deeply tired. Not angry even. Just tired. That kind of tiredness changes the atmosphere between people. She stops reacting as intensely, stops trying to force emotional clarity, stops fighting certain battles. At first, he mistakes that calmness for improvement. Less conflict, less emotional intensity. But really, sometimes it means she's beginning to emotionally disengage to protect herself. And tragically, that's often when he finally starts appreciating her emotional presence more deeply. Human beings are strange like that. We notice warmth most intensely once it starts disappearing. I think that's why ordinary memories become unbearable later. Not the dramatic fights. The small moments. Her sitting cross-legged on the couch scrolling through her phone while half listening to him talk. The way she absent-mindedly fixed his hoodie collar. The nights she stayed emotionally gentle with him even when she was hurting too. Those memories gain emotional weight afterward because now he sees the tenderness he overlooked while focusing on his own emotional overwhelm. And sometimes the guilt drives through tiny flashbacks, like remembering a moment where she was clearly trying to connect emotionally and he gave her distracted energy instead. Maybe she asked, "Are we okay?" And he responded casually because emotionally confronting the depth of her question felt uncomfortable. Yeah, why wouldn't we be? But now, months later, he remembers her face after he said it. The way she looked unconvinced. The way she went quiet afterward. And suddenly, he realizes. She was trying to tell me she was slipping away emotionally. That delayed understanding destroys people, especially emotionally avoidant men who process emotional significance after the moment has already passed. Because now the relationship plays differently in memory. Now he sees all the emotional effort hidden inside her ordinary behaviors. The patience, the emotional restraint, the constant attempts to reconnect without making him feel pressured. And he realizes something painful. She gave him softer versions of her pain than she probably actually felt. That realization creates a specific kind of regret. Not just regret for losing her, regret for not understanding her exhaustion while she was still standing there trying. And honestly, women can feel when they're no longer being emotionally seen clearly. That loneliness changes them, even if they stay physically present. I think some women emotionally grieve the relationship while still inside it because they slowly realize the version of themselves their partner loves most is the version constantly overextending emotionally. And eventually they become too tired to maintain that version consistently. That's why the woman he misses now may not even resemble who she became at the end. At the end, she was quieter, more withdrawn, less emotionally expressive. Not because she stopped loving him entirely, because she stopped feeling emotionally safe enough to keep loving him the same way. And unfortunately, people often react strongest to emotional absence after ignoring emotional exhaustion for too long. Now suddenly he misses her warmth, her attentiveness, the emotional safety she brought into his life. But while she was offering those things daily, he adapted to them, assumed them, treated them like permanent emotional infrastructure instead of fragile human effort. That's what hindsight exposes brutally. Love is not self-sustaining. People tire. People emotionally deplete. People slowly stop pouring into places where reciprocity feels uncertain. And by the time he fully understands the emotional cost she carried quietly, she's often already rebuilding herself privately, trying to reconnect with the parts of herself she abandoned while loving him. That realization aches differently, because now the memories feel almost sacred, not in some dramatic spiritual way, just painfully human. He remembers her sitting beside him during ordinary nights he barely appreciated emotionally enough at the time. And now, he would give anything to relive one of those evenings exactly as it was. Even the silence. Especially the silence. Because back then her silence still contained emotional closeness. Now it contains distance. And somewhere deep down, he knows the version of her he misses most was already quietly disappearing, while he assumed she would always remain emotionally there. I think there's a moment that changes everything. Not externally at first. Nothing dramatic happens. No speech. No final argument. No perfectly worded goodbye where everybody suddenly becomes emotionally mature and self-aware. It's quieter than that. Almost invisible. It's the moment she stops organizing her emotional life around what he might do next. And honestly, that shift is so subtle in the beginning that even she doesn't fully realize it's happening. She still thinks about him, still misses him sometimes, still feels her chest tighten when his name appears unexpectedly. But something underneath the attachment begins loosening. Not the love necessarily, the desperation. That's different. Very different. Because for a long time, Her emotional state depended on tiny signals from him. A delayed reply could ruin her evening. One emotionally warm conversation could give her hope for another week. One cold interaction could send her spiraling into self-doubt again. That's what emotionally inconsistent relationships do to people. They train the nervous system to survive on fragments, breadcrumbs, potential, temporary closeness, and eventually she gets tired. Not in a dramatic "I'm finally healed" kind of way. More like, I can't keep living emotionally like this. I think people romanticize emotional detachment too much because they skip over the exhaustion that usually creates it. Most women don't wake up one morning suddenly empowered and unaffected. Usually they arrive there slowly after too many nights spent overthinking mixed signals and emotionally carrying the relationship alone. After too many mornings checking the phone before their eyes are fully open. After too many conversations where they asked for emotional consistency and got confusion in return. At some point, her body simply cannot maintain the same level of emotional hypervigilance anymore. And honestly, that's where peace starts entering quietly. Not joy at first. Peace, there's a difference. Joy is active. Peace is the absence of constant emotional survival mode. Suddenly, she notices she went several hours without checking whether he viewed her story. She realizes she laughed genuinely with friends without mentally drifting back to him every 5 minutes. She starts sleeping through the night occasionally instead of waking up emotionally anxious. Tiny things become huge after emotional chaos. And ironically, that's often when people feel her energy most strongly. Not because she's trying to become magnetic, because she's finally becoming emotionally self-contained again. That changes the atmosphere around a person. Before, there was emotional grasping underneath everything. Hope, fear, waiting. Now there's more stillness. And stillness feels different, especially to someone who got used to her emotional attention always reaching toward him. I think emotionally avoidant men often sense this shift before they consciously understand it. Suddenly, she's less reactive, less emotionally available on command, less focused on monitoring his emotional state. And something about that unsettles him deeply. Not because she became cold, because she stopped revolving emotionally around him. That realization can feel terrifying to someone who unconsciously relied on her emotional consistency while struggling to provide it back fully. Now, the dynamic feels unfamiliar. She's not chasing clarity anymore, not forcing conversations, not anxiously trying to reconnect after every emotionally confusing interaction. And weirdly, that calmness affects him more than emotional intensity ever did. Because emotional intensity still centered him. Detachment centers her. That changes everything. I remember someone once describing this shift in such a painfully real way. She said, I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes waiting for him. And that's when he suddenly started texting more. That pattern happens constantly. Not because men consciously enjoy emotional games. Usually because people feel changes in emotional availability instinctively. Before, her energy said, please choose me. Now her energy says, I'm choosing myself even while grieving you. That difference is enormous emotionally. And honestly, part of her still wants him sometimes. That's important too. Because real detachment isn't emotionally clean. There are still nights she almost reaches out. Still moments she wonders if he's finally becoming emotionally honest somewhere without her. Still flashes of memory that hit unexpectedly. Like hearing a phrase he used to say. Passing a restaurant they went to once. Seeing a car that looks like his and feeling her stomach drop for half a second before logic catches up. The body takes longer to detach than the mind sometimes. That's human. But now there's space between the feeling and the reaction. Before, every emotional trigger pulled her directly back into longing. Now she notices the feeling without immediately collapsing into it. That's growth. Not becoming emotionally numb. Learning emotional self-abandonment is no longer sustainable. I think one of the biggest shifts happens when she stops needing emotional certainty from him in order to move forward internally. That's a painful stage, because unresolved relationships create obsessive mental loops. Why did he pull away? Did he love me? Did I imagine the connection? Would things be different if I handled things differently? The mind searches endlessly for answers because uncertainty feels emotionally unsafe. But eventually, exhaustion interrupts the cycle. Not because she solved every emotional question, because she realizes no explanation will undo the emotional inconsistency she lived through. And slowly, acceptance starts replacing obsession. Not complete acceptance, partial acceptance, human acceptance, the kind that still aches sometimes, but no longer controls her entire emotional world. I think that's when the grief becomes quieter too, less dramatic, more integrated. She still misses him occasionally, still feels tenderness when she remembers certain vulnerable moments between them. But she also remembers the confusion now, the emotional instability, the nights she cried trying to understand behavior that never fully made sense. Memory becomes more balanced finally, not just idealized longing. Reality returns, and reality changes attachment. Because eventually she stops romanticizing potential more than consistency. That's huge, especially for women who love someone's emotional depth in flashes while suffering from their emotional unavailability the rest of the time. Now she begins asking different questions internally. Not, does he love me? But, can this relationship emotionally sustain me? That shift changes everything. Because love alone stops being enough justification for self-abandonment. And honestly, sometimes this emotional shift happens so quietly that even he can't pinpoint exactly when he started feeling her absence more intensely. He just knows something changed. Her energy feels less reachable now, less emotionally dependent on his responses, less willing to survive on partial effort. And suddenly, he feels more emotionally exposed than before. Because now, he has to confront the relationship without her emotional labor cushioning everything constantly. That's uncomfortable, especially for men who unconsciously relied on her emotional pursuit to keep the connection alive. Now, the silence feels more permanent somehow, not hostile, resolved. And resolved energy is difficult to manipulate emotionally. Not because she's trying to punish him, because she's tired, truly tired. Tired of monitoring emotional inconsistency, tired of hoping clarity will eventually appear if she just loves harder, tired of negotiating with reality emotionally. At some point she realizes, if someone wants to emotionally show up consistently, they will. Maybe imperfectly, maybe awkwardly, maybe with fear, but there will still be movement toward connection instead of constant retreat from it. That realization hurts, but it also frees her slowly. And once she stops needing the outcome, once she stops emotionally bargaining with possibility, something inside her settles. Not completely, not forever. She still has moments, late night moments especially. Moments where loneliness romanticizes the past again. Moments where she misses his voice more than the actual relationship dynamic. Moments where grief briefly disguises itself as hope. But now she catches herself sooner. Now there's an inner voice underneath the longing. A quieter voice. Missing him doesn't mean abandoning yourself again. I know. You can love someone and still recognize the relationship hurt you. I know. That awareness changes the entire emotional landscape. Because now her peace matters too. Not just the connection. And strangely enough, That's often the exact moment people finally feel her power most clearly. Not because she became emotionally harder, because she stopped needing someone else's emotional choices to determine her worth. I think one of the hardest things to accept is that some relationships never really get a clean ending. No cinematic goodbye. No final conversation where both people suddenly become emotionally articulate and honest. No moment where the pain wraps itself neatly into closure. Sometimes things just fade emotionally in uneven directions. And honestly, that can hurt more. Because ambiguity leaves the nervous system searching long after the relationship itself has already changed. One person pulls away slowly. The other realizes things too late. Then both people spend months replaying different versions of the same memories, trying to understand where exactly the emotional shift became irreversible. But the truth is, most relationships don't break in one moment. They erode, quietly, through missed timing, unspoken fears, emotional inconsistency, to people wanting love while struggling to sustain emotional safety inside it. And sometimes nobody is fully the villain. That's the uncomfortable part. Sometimes he really did love her. He just loved her through emotional avoidance, fear, confusion, shame, inconsistency. And sometimes she really did understand him deeply. Too deeply, maybe. To the point where she kept excusing behavior that slowly exhausted her emotionally. That complexity is what makes certain connections impossible to fully get over in clean ways. Because the relationship wasn't fake, just unstable. There's a difference. And unstable love leaves strange emotional fingerprints on people. Especially when both people touch something emotionally real in each other, but couldn't maintain it consistently enough to build peace around it. I think that's why some connections linger internally long after communication fades. Not because people are weak, because unfinished emotional experiences stay active in the body. The moments where he almost opened fully, the nights she almost gave up but stayed, the conversations interrupted by fear, withdrawal, pride, timing. All of it remains emotionally suspended somewhere. That's why random memories still surface months later unexpectedly. Not dramatic memories either. Tiny ones. Her sitting in the passenger seat with one leg folded under her while music played quietly. The sound of him laughing unexpectedly when he finally relaxed emotionally for a moment. The way silence felt between them during good days. That's what hurts eventually. The ordinary intimacy. Not just the loss of a person, the loss of a shared emotional atmosphere. And honestly, both people usually change after relationships like this, even if they never speak again. She changes because loving him forced her to confront how much emotional inconsistency she was willing to tolerate in exchange for connection. He changes because losing her eventually forces him to confront emotions he delayed processing while she was still fully there. And unfortunately, people don't always evolve at the same speed. That's the tragedy underneath a lot of emotionally intense relationships. The timing never aligns completely. She needed emotional clarity while she was still open enough to receive it. He often finds emotional clarity after distance creates enough silence for his defenses to finally crack. By then, the relationship has already changed shape. I remember someone once saying, "He gave me the love I needed emotionally after I no longer trusted it enough to relax into it." That sentence honestly explains so much. Because sometimes growth arrives late. Not fake. Not manipulative. Just late. And lateness changes things emotionally. Especially after someone spends too long surviving emotional instability. At some point, her nervous system stops believing words without consistency attached to them. That's not bitterness. That's self-protection learned through repetition. So even if he reaches out eventually, even if he suddenly becomes emotionally expressive, Even if he finally says the things she once begged to hear, part of her may no longer know how to emotionally rest inside the connection anymore. That's heartbreaking for both people, because now he's emotionally awake inside a relationship dynamic she became emotionally exhausted inside, and neither person fully knows what to do with that reality. Sometimes they try again briefly. That happens too. People reconnect, talk again, meet for coffee pretending they're emotionally neutral when both of their hands are slightly shaking under the table. And for a moment it almost feels familiar again. The eye contact, the emotional pull, the tiny details only they still notice about each other. But underneath it lives history now. History changes the nervous system. Now she notices every inconsistency faster. Now he feels pressure more quickly. Now both people are hyper-aware of how badly things hurt before. And sometimes love still exists there, but trust and emotional safety doesn't. That distinction matters more than people realize, because chemistry can survive instability longer than peace can. I think some connections become emotionally meaningful precisely because they remain unresolved, not idealized, not healthy necessarily, just unfinished. Human beings emotionally revisit unfinished things constantly. That's why years later someone can still remember one sentence, one look, one night where everything briefly felt emotionally honest before fear returned again. And honestly, I don't think every connection is meant to become permanent. Some relationships exist to expose things. Attachment wounds, fear of vulnerability, the emotional cost of inconsistency, the difference between longing and stability, painful lessons, human lessons. And even though people online love turning these relationships into spiritual destiny stories, sometimes they're just two emotionally wounded people meeting at the wrong stage of their lives. One still learning how to stay emotionally open. One still learning not to abandon herself trying to keep love alive. That doesn't make the connection meaningless. It just makes it human. And maybe that's harder to accept, because humans want clean endings. We want someone to blame. We want certainty. We want the final message that explains everything emotionally. But real relationships rarely give that. Sometimes the final conversation is awkward, incomplete, disappointingly ordinary. Sometimes the relationship technically ends through silence instead of decisions. A slower kind of heartbreak. The kind where texts become less frequent, calls become shorter, emotional access quietly disappears over time until one day both people realize they no longer know how to reach each other naturally anymore. That kind of ending lingers, especially at night, especially during transitional moments in life, because emotionally significant people become attached to memory pathways. Music, restaurants, weather, cities. Years later, something random can still reopen the emotional atmosphere briefly. Not because you're still supposed to be together, because memory is physical. And honestly, I think some part of both people always wonders, what if we met later? What if we had been more emotionally mature? What if fear hadn't interfered so much? What if love had arrived with stability instead of confusion? Those questions don't always disappear completely, but eventually life keeps moving anyway. She rebuilds herself slowly, learns what emotional consistency feels like, learns her body should not have to live in constant emotional uncertainty to feel loved. And him, maybe he becomes softer eventually, more emotionally honest. Maybe he finally understands the depth of what she was trying to communicate months too late while driving alone one night. That happens more than people admit. Delayed understanding, delayed grief, delayed emotional clarity. And maybe that's the saddest part of all. Sometimes people genuinely loved each other, but their emotional timing kept missing each other by inches. Still, not every meaningful connection is meant to end with reunion. Some end with awareness, with growth, with regret, with tenderness that can no longer survive in the same form it once did. And maybe maturity is finally accepting that love is not always measured by who stays forever. Sometimes it's measured by who changed you permanently, even through the confusion, even through the inconsistency, even through the silence. Because some people leave your life slowly, but their impact stays in your nervous system long after the relationship itself stops knowing what it is. And maybe that's the part nobody prepares you for. Sometimes the connection becomes clearest right after you stop trying to hold onto it.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this message resonated with your soul, remember to subscribe and continue this journey with us here on Twin Flame Journey. And always remember, what is meant for your soul will always find its way back to you. Until next time, beautiful soul, trust the journey.